And hello, everyone. Thank you again once more for joining us for a wonderful town hall opportunity. I'm Mark Johnston, your host for the hour, and we have the great pleasure of welcoming Tony Williams, who is the CEO over at Major Precious Metals, and we have a sit down to really hear from Tony on the inside of the company, what's been happening with Major Precious Metals. Tony, thank you for joining us today.
Hello, everyone. My pleasure to be here.
I appreciate your time. And of course, we do want to hear from everyone where you are in the world for our session today. And as we get going with Tony's presentation, we encourage you to put your questions in the Q&A column. And as we finish up the presentation, I'll come back online with Tony and do a back and forth, dig into some deeper, fine details. Tony, at this point, I'm going to hand the reins to you. I'll look forward to the presentation, and we'll see you on the other side.
Thank you. Look forward to it. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Tony Williams. I'm the Chairman and CEO of Major Precious Metals, and I'd like to introduce you to all to the Skaergaard Palladium gold deposit in Greenland, which is emerging now as a previously overlooked precious metal asset with very significant and relatively near-term development potential, which I hope to demonstrate can add value for all stakeholders as we develop along the mine development cycle. Since acquiring Skaergaard in November 2020, the company's completed a very comprehensive reanalysis of historical exploration. We've remodeled the geology and produced a 43-101 compliant mineral resource, which is available on CEDAR. And the independent estimate confirms Skaergaard as a palladium and gold resource of global significance, in our opinion. And we'll talk more about that as we go forward. As a development project, Skaergaard has in effect been dormant for over a decade. And our experienced team are in effect relaunching the project with palladium and gold prices buoyant and in a safe, mining-friendly jurisdiction, which I can enlarge on as we go forward. This is just a corporate snapshot. In terms of value, which everyone's interested in, at our current market cap of circa 78 million Canadian dollars, we have less than $5 an ounce of contained value at base case prices, which in the case of palladium are well below today's spot valuation for palladium. And we'll go into that in more detail, the basis for this calculation as we go forward. So in our opinion, there's plenty of upside potential as we progress along the mine development cycle. This is a slide prepared by the Laurentian Bank. And I think what this demonstrates, and I think it's important here to frame the sheer magnitude of the opportunity at Skaergaard. We can already demonstrate a palladium equivalent resource of close to 20 million ounces, all independently modeled and supported by a 120-page 43-101 report recently filed on CEDAR, as I mentioned. And it's in a safe mining-friendly jurisdiction. The other two major producing areas, as I'm sure most of you know, for palladium, for other platinum group metals, are in South Africa and in Russia. And this is one of the largest of those types of deposits outside those jurisdictions, and it's in a safe mining-friendly jurisdiction, the importance of which can't be underestimated. It's a development project with very significant historical exploration that has been dormant for over 10 years and is now being relaunched. The owners team, my own background is I'm a mining geologist. I graduated many years ago from the Royal School of Mines. I've been involved in investment banking. I've been involved in venture capital for most of my career. And this is all available on our website, but we've put together a very significant team over the last 6 months. Sam Quinn has just joined us as VP Corporate Finance, Gustavo Delandati as VP Exploration, and perhaps the most important guy right now is Jim Sparling, our project manager, many years experience in Greenland, and he's put together the team, the logistical aspects of the project. And of course, in COVID times, this has been challenging to say the least, but as you'll see as we go forward, we're all ready to go now. Big program in the next month or so. And Paul and Joel listed there have also been with the company for a while and are playing major roles as we go forward. Greenland, the Greenland mineral sector. Greenland mineral sector is growing in very much in increasing geopolitical importance. The new government has just reaffirmed its support for all sustainable mining projects, only excluding uranium mining, which has had quite a bit of publicity recently, but many statements from the government in recent days and months reaffirming their support for sustainable mining. It's recently been ranked number 2 in Europe after Finland and above Mexico and Norway in this Fraser Institute annual survey of mining companies, which has great significance in the mining world, and investors often look at this as a template for where they should be investing. What is the opportunity? Well, without being too flippant, it all starts and ends in the market. And we're reviving Skaergaard at a time when platinum and gold prices for platinum group metals, and particularly for palladium, are, to say the least, robust, and market fundamentals, which we will go into and illustrate later, are very strong going forward for palladium as well. And we have a lot of gold, which in effect is our byproduct, very useful byproduct to have. Critical minerals. I think you've all heard a lot about critical minerals in recent times with batteries and renewable energy, etc. And the project, and Greenland in general, has an abundance of critical metals. In our project, we not only have palladium and platinum, as well as gold, we have a lot of titanium, vanadium, and some copper. But it's basically a palladium gold project with potentially saleable critical minerals to add to the rock value. Now, this is attracting now a lot of interest from a lot of European agencies and people like the Exim Bank. And you might ask, what's the importance of this? But they've already demonstrated that they are prepared to provide fairly substantial financing for pre-production funding, for feasibility work, etc. And of course, from our perspective going forward, this is very important for us and for other developers in Greenland, because it could be very anti-dilutive funding that could be available to us as we progress along the development cycle. Palladium, many of you may know it, many of you may not. What's it all about? Well, demand for palladium is still driven by the increasing metal requirements in vehicle catalytic converters. The palladium market has in effect been in production deficit for several years, and the tighter pollution standards worldwide are actually spurring demand for palladium in particular. And there is some limited substitution at these high prices by platinum, but very little. And the further tightening of these emission standards and higher catalyst loadings for things like hybrid cars mean overall metal requirements as we emerge post-pandemic are actually much higher than they were in 2019, which is really the first full year prior to the pandemic skewing some of the statistics. Again, the stronger post-pandemic economic activity will also boost palladium demand, particularly, for example, in the chemical sector. Of course, we all agree there will be growing EV penetration in the next decades. But as I said, palladium is a key component of hybrid vehicles, which are certainly going to bridge the gap for a good few many years to come. And also, it's not generally known that a new generation of catalytic converters are key components in fuel cells, in proton exchange membranes, for example, for transport and for renewable energy feeds. Now, this growing hydrogen economy narrative will further underpin palladium demand for years to come. And decarbonization of the global economy is gathering pace. And we would say, and I think we're supported by many examples, that palladium is right at the forefront as a green energy metal, which gives it appeal to a lot of the new impact investing funds that are looking for investments with global decarbonization at their heart. Okay, the Skaergaard Project. Skaergaard Project is now almost has 100% surface exposure because of retreating of the ice. It's what we call in geological terms a layered intrusion. It's been very well studied since the 1930s, and there's a very high confidence in the overall geological and structural interpretation. It's located, as you can see on that slide, on the east coast of Greenland, and actually only about 400 kilometers from the west of Iceland, and we access the project, as well as by barge and by ship into the fjords, by twin otter flight, only 2.5 hours from Western Iceland. It is rugged terrain and it's remote, but in mining terms, it's relatively accessible, as I hope we'll be able to demonstrate here. Of course, everyone has to have a strong focus on all ESG aspects of a project, particularly now as in Greenland, as we start along the mine development cycle. And this is not only by lowering carbon footprint with things like renewable energy, battery storage, and the like, which interestingly has already been demonstrated in some remote Canadian locations with indigenous communities. But also in Greenland, it's very important that we consider minimizing the impact on the ecosystems, on biodiversity, which is very key in Greenland. And I'm pleased to say that we have very good relationships with the government, and all the permits for this upcoming summer program, a very extensive drilling and economic evaluation program, are all already in place. Okay, what do we have here? We own 100% of 3 large license areas. The main license areas host the Skaergaard intrusion. This is the main license area here. I don't know whether you can see that. And a recent addition going north of a very large exploration license with very prospective geology, and then a smaller license adjacent to the main intrusion, which covers the airstrip and the exploration camp. There are no encumbrances. We own 100% free and clear. The only royalty is a 2.5% royalty to the government on future production revenue. As I said, the deposit has been well studied from scientific horizons. The mineralized package is approximately 45 meters thick, with 3 main precious metals horizons between 1 and 3 meters each in thickness, separated by zones of iron, titanium, and vanadium mineralization, these critical metals that I mentioned earlier on. It's actually quite a unique precious metal content, strong in palladium and gold. The next slide is probably the key slide in the presentation, and I don't know how clearly you can see it there. It's on our website in the 43-101 presentation, and you can see, looking in the indicated category, that we already have in the 2 main contained precious metals over 4 million ounces of palladium and close to just over 1 million ounces of gold. But I think the real excitement here is when you look at the inferred categories here, where we have approaching 10 million ounces or further of contained palladium and just shy of 4 million ounces of gold. All this is independently modeled and supported by a 120-page 43-101 report, independently authored, available on CEDAR. So I think when we say it's already a resource of global significance with known mineralization open in all directions, I think you can see the sheer excitement that we have, again, as we relaunch Skaergaard in a precious metal environment that is very different from the one of 11 or 12 years ago, when it was looked at as maybe a gold project with some minor platinum group metal add-ons. Since then, the platinum group prices, palladium in particular, have skyrocketed, and this resource, based on purely underground mining at this stage, so I'll talk about open pit potential in a moment, is done at palladium prices of $1,725, which are almost $1,000 lower than today's spot price palladium. Now, some of the rise in palladium prices recently has been event-driven by events at Norilsk. There have been technical problems there with mine flooding and collapse of some buildings due to global warming. Problems in South Africa ongoing, not just because of COVID, but because of electricity situations there. And I can't emphasize enough the geopolitical importance of where this ore body is in Greenland. It's not in Russia. It's not in South Africa. It's a resource of global significance, already independently modeled with close to 20 million palladium equivalent ounces, with known mineralization open in all directions. Just clip through a few slides over the next little few slides that will just illustrate the geology. It's dipping at 20 to 25 degrees south. It's about 4 kilometers thick in total, with the mineralized being drilled up to about a kilometer up to now. Looking north, it's stratiform, semi-horizontal, with these three main horizons of precious metals, separated by the iron, titanium, and vanadium mineralization, which is quite extensive throughout the whole deposit. This is some shots of the airstrip and the site and the camp and the view into the fjord on the visit just before we secured the final project, where we were looking at the due diligence and doing the resampling, an extensive resampling of the work that's been done. And all this is illustrated in the 43101 deposit, the whole history of exploration, the QA, QC, the quality control, the sampling that's been redone, all in the 43101 report. We now plan, looking at the timeline, which I've mentioned, we now plan to accelerate the timeline and bring Skaergaard back into focus. The summer drilling program is extensive, up to 15,000 meters of additional drilling, parallel studies on mining and metallurgy, leading to, we hope, an updated mineral resource estimate, which we're targeting for Q4 of 2021, and then going into a PEA, a preliminary economic analysis, using updated metal price forecasts to determine the next steps towards potential economic extraction. It's important to say, as we look at the next steps, that we're coming off a base here of very significant historical exploration, which has been independently resampled and remodeled to demonstrate this significant resource. As I've mentioned already, a further 15 kilometers of drilling is planned. We're already assembled in Greenland, going through COVID protocols, and we hope to start the program in mid-July. And again, not only will we confirm and upgrade the existing resource, we'll also look at some open pit potential in the north and evaluate, of course, the other critical minerals, looking to add to the rock value. Mobilization, as I've mentioned, is underway. We have 4 diamond drill rigs on a barge on their way to Greenland right now. We have retrofitted an icebreaker with a helipad, and that's also on its way to Iceland, through Iceland onto Greenland, and will soon be on site, we hope, in the next few weeks. And that will add additional support for field crews in terms of accommodation and the helicopter support, etc. And it should be on station in the fjord adjacent to the deposit in the next few weeks. But we're already in Greenland, and we'll have started the prep for the drilling program as the ship arrives on site. The program will run till the end of October, and then we will segue into the mineral resource estimates, and then moving on, we think by the first quarter of next year, into the PEA, where we just look at more and more detail and look at the full economic extraction potential. Using the ship is, we believe, an efficient and very environmentally friendly way to support the program throughout this campaign. And next year we would anticipate doing the same, using a combination of the exploration camp already established and fjord-based, ship-based support. Further metallurgical work, along with mining studies, of course, will form a pretty important part of the program. We've done a lot of preliminary metallurgical work, and obviously this has been very encouraging. We seem to be able to produce a combined palladium and gold-rich concentrate using standard reagents in the PGM industry. And also it appears that a separate, what we've described as a VTM concentrate, a vanadium titanium magnetite concentrate, can also be produced using standard techniques, magnetic separation, flotation, etc. But I need to emphasize here, further work is needed to further evaluate, optimize both mining and metallurgy, and we will provide much more data for this through this program as we go into the PEA early next year. And then, of course, that will set the scene for the work for next summer, as we hope to fast track into feasibility. We're also keeping a very close watch on a new hydrometallurgical process that's being developed by Pallinghurst at their Sedibelo mine in South Africa. And this process, which incidentally is called the KEL process, it produces metal from a mixed PGE concentrate and produces metal on site. It's being promoted as a clean technology alternative for the PGM industry, with lower greenhouse gas emissions, etc., lower electricity, lower water consumption, a sort of green benefaction on site, accelerating what we want to embed into our program as the development of a green supply chain. This KEL process is modular, it's apparently scalable, it's being tested on a commercial basis, and we're also in touch through our major shareholders with the people that own the patent for this, and we will certainly be studying this and looking at its applicability to Skaergaard as we go forward. It's a game changer for the whole PGM industry and Skaergaard, of course, but if it works, we don't need it. The preliminary metallurgy is very positive. So these are the next steps for the program. How's it all going to be funded? We announced a week or so ago 10 million, up to a 10 million non-brokered private placement. And those are the terms. The full details are on our website. I'm pleased to say that we announced this morning that we're close to our initial target, and we've already closed on over $8.5 million of this placement. It's still open, and if anybody listening to the broadcast today wants to participate, full details are on our website, and also brokers at Haywood Securities under the auspices of Andrew Williams, and at Laurentian Bank, coordinated by Joseph Galacci, their head of mining. They'd be very happy to help you on your way there. But as I say, full details on the site. And if anyone wants to contact the company, we're also happy to provide full details. Very encouraging that we've had such a rapid response to this private placement, which will support the already substantial funding that we've put into the project as we've mobilized and got the thing going and got everyone to Greenland. So that's the next steps in financing. And then, of course, you ask yourself, everyone asks themselves, well, is this good value? Is this investment proposition value for money? We think it speaks for itself. In terms of value, we think it's a pretty unique opportunity. I said less than $5 an ounce in the ground of contained precious metals as we stand today, with mineralization open in all directions. We are reviving the project at a time when the metal prices for the particular palladium and gold main mix that we have are particularly strong, and we think that palladium in particular is entering into a super cycle for the next decade. Oh, and by the way, we have a lot of gold too. We own 100% of this large palladium and gold deposit. It's already of global significance, and I keep repeating, the mineralization is open in all directions, and we have potential for additional critical minerals as a saleable product. We also have a large piece of what I would describe as very prospective geological real estate to explore in the coming months, although the focus is going to be very much on getting into the PEA, getting data for the PEA to have a successful preliminary economic evaluation of the project early next year. Oh, and by the way, it's in Greenland. It's not in Russia. It's not in South Africa. It's not unusual for these large layered intrusions to contain multiple deposits. And just anecdotally, it's interesting to note that over 30 mines have been developed on the Bushveld complex since Hans Merensky discovered it in 1924. So I think we're well placed to add significant value as we progress Skaergaard along the mine development cycle. That's all I've really got to say on the presentation. I'll be very happy to take your questions. And Mark, over to you.
I appreciate that, Tony. Thank you. A very thorough tour through what's happening at Major Precious Metals, and always fascinating, Tony, to talk to you. We had a great journey during our vid conference last month, and I recall, for many of us, Greenland, we remember from high school geography, and that's about all we remember. So hearing some of the details about the jurisdiction, what happens there, and the process of mining in Greenland is a huge benefit. And I loved your line. Oh, and by the way, we have a lot of gold too. So I appreciate that perspective very much. Let's talk about the jurisdiction a bit, because in our vid conference, you shared with us that it's not dissimilar to the Northern Ontario, Northern British Columbia type of region and territory. Can you tell me a little bit more about the process? How difficult will it be to mine the project given the remoteness?
Well, no, I think there are many, many examples, as you say, in northern Canada, in Russia, which I've had a lot of experience of recently. Look, there's no getting away from it. It is remote. It is rugged terrain. But in mining terms, it's relatively accessible. We have a 600-meter airstrip maintained by the government. Fly in 2 hours, 2.5 hours in a Twin Otter from Western Iceland. And really, the fjords are ice-free from late May to late October. So for exploration, there is a seasonality to the exploration. But for the mining, it'll be a 24-hour a day, 365-day mining operation on a FIFO basis, a fly in, fly out on a rotational basis. Many, many examples of mines around the world in cold, remote locations doing that. So yes, of course there are challenges. There always are, and this is why the detailed data from this year's program is going to upgrade the historical stuff. And we've got a very big database to work on, and we think we can fast track this project into development.
I appreciate that, Tony. Thank you much. Let's continue to explore historically. You mentioned fascinating information around the original discovery almost 100 years ago now, 1924. The Skaergaard Project has been around for many years. Why is it being developed now?
Well, as I say, 1924 was when the Bushveld was discovered. Skaergaard, scientifically, I guess people started to write scientific papers about Skaergaard in the 1930s. And it was certainly, along with the Bushveld complex, taught to me as a young student in the Royal School of Mines as a classic example of a layered intrusion. But your point is very well made. And I come back to this phrase that I often use: it's all about the market. A decade ago, it was shown that there was pervasive mineralization within the Skaergaard intrusion. Mineralization first discovered by a company called Platinova in joint venture with Corona in the late 80s, early 90s. A couple of iterations since then. An Australian company called Platina drilled it extensively in 2009, 2010. So over a decade ago, but PGM prices were much, much lower then. And it was viewed on as a purely gold project with a few add-ons. Today, 70% of the revenue will come from palladium. And that's at prices $1,000 below where palladium is today. So whatever your view of prices, and we'll be upgrading this precious metal price forecast in the PEA. It's all about the market. That's why it's being developed now. It's been, as a development project, it's been dormant for over a decade. We have the skill set within our team. Myself, the guys I've brought on have done this several times before in bringing projects through the development cycle. And who knows how and who will be developing it. It's unusual for juniors who take projects through feasibility to develop them, but we're certainly already attracting the attention of some bigger industry groups. We have no intention of doing anything other than taking this along the cycle for the next several months into 2022 and 2023. But at that point of feasibility, we'll have a big handle on what's needed to start mining there. We think we'll have potential starter open pits, and it's what we call a stage gate development in stages with infrastructure coming along, well capable of Major Precious Metals doing that. But I think by then we will have a lot of attention from the big boys in this industry.
Great to hear, Tony. Thank you for that. Let's talk a bit more about the technical side. You mentioned open pit. Can you tell me overall, will this be open pit or underground or a combination? And if it's open pit, will the government support it in a full way?
I think the bulk of this will be an underground mine. But again, from Precious Metals taking this forward, we're pretty confident with our geological modeling, which we've done with our own team and in conjunction with SLR, who are independent qualified person on this for the 43-101 aspects.
Okay.
That we're pretty confident that this drilling program this summer will identify some areas on the north of the deposit where we now have 100% exposure because of melting ice to look very closely at open pit. My feeling right now, again, we have to be very careful what we say in the public domain. So I say this is just an opinion right now, that we will have some starter open pits and then a combination of selective mining underground, selective mining of the precious metal horizons with continuous miners, such as done in many areas of the Bushveld complex. But what I'm also hoping for is some areas, maybe some significant areas of the ore body where we can have bulk mining techniques, because we will have saleable mineral product in these critical minerals, in this iron, vanadium, titanium package that we have in between the precious metal horizons. But it's too early to speculate on that right now,
okay.
Mark. But that's the excitement. As if we didn't have enough excitement already with this big palladium content with gold as a byproduct, we have this added excitement of the critical mineral content.
I appreciate that. You talked about the magnitude of potential in your presentation, so that's always an exciting component. Let's bring Mother Nature as we talk about the technical side of what's happening at the project. How has the ice melt helped the development of the project?
Well, fortunately, unfortunately, it's helped it. It helped it very, very much, because we now have much increased exposure of the deposit. So our mapping, our channel sampling, the location of our drill sites are all improved massively from where we were a decade or so ago. So global warming in this sense has helped not only this project, but I think this is why you're seeing such a resurgence of focus of interest by many international companies on the geology of the whole of Greenland, obviously on the coastal strips, which are now being further and further exposed by global warming and by the melting of the ice. So it's very, for however you feel it, it's very significant in terms of projects like Skaergaard and other projects in Greenland. But I'm just focusing on Skaergaard. That's all that concerns me right now.
Understood. Thank you for that. And Tony, what sort of geophysics work has been done on the project itself?
It's been limited, and I think we need to explore this much more during this summer program. We feel there's scope for downhole geophysics, looking at the horizons, but because it's high in palladium and high in gold, we don't have that much of a separate magnetic signature. So, but we are looking into the fact of, and obviously on the huge exploration license we've got going north, we're hoping that geophysics can, as it is in other projects that of this nature in South Africa and actually in Finland with another development project that's going on, that IP induced polarization can help us evaluate targets going north. But I think on the main Skaergaard intrusion, we have our arms around the ore body already, and this is just going to be more and more drilling. Yes, downhole geophysics may help us, and it may help look at continuity of mineral horizons, etc. But we already have our arms around this resource on the main Skaergaard intrusion. It's just more of the same: more drilling, more sampling, more metallurgical work, more mining studies, leading to the PEA early next year.
Great, thank you for that. And speaking of the drilling, what are your specific goals for the outcomes of your infill drilling program in terms of resource conversion? And are there opportunities to identify new resources as well?
We hope both. I mean, I'm certainly not going to speculate. Somebody had asked me, well, what percentage of inferred will go into indicated? What percentage? I just say, I think it'll be reasonably significant. But I often make the flippant comment, many a good anomaly ruined by drilling. But this is not the case here, because the geology is so well known, because the structural work, there must be umpteen scientific papers written about Skaergaard over the years. So we have high confidence in the geology. We have high confidence in the continuity of the mineralization. There are hotspots within the sections, which again we hope to evaluate in more detail right now. But it's idle to speculate. But we're pretty confident that of a fairly significant moving along the cycle where indicated becomes measured, inferred becomes indicated, and we get more inferred.
Great. Thank you, Tony. You brought up palladium earlier. While the palladium market deficit narrowed in 2020 compared to 19, how long and what needs to happen, would you say, to achieve a more balanced market there?
Need to be more and more discoveries. I mean, COVID had an influence on that, but by my reckoning, and I've done a lot of studying of this, and I have a lot of discussions with erudite market commentators, such as a group called SFA Oxford. They are the bee's knees when it comes to all the statistics on the PGM industry, and they're predicting that the palladium deficit end 2021, as economic activity picks up, could be close to 1 million ounces. And that's in a sort of a market that is a supply demand, where supply is about 6.5 from primary, another couple of million from recycling. You know, there's going to be a million ounce deficit this year. Whether that will ping prices back above 3,000, I don't know. We're not factoring that into any of our studies. We're using very conservative long-term prices. But palladium is going to be in deficit for the foreseeable future, because demand is not going away. The catalytic converter use for palladium is going to be maintained for the next decade, despite EV penetration, because it's used in hybrids and it's used in these new fuel cells, you know, in the hydrogen economy, which is certainly going to expand exponentially over the next decade or so. So we have no worries about demand. Supply is limited. And incidentally, we talk about global warming. I mean, Russia, the Norilsk, along with South Africa, both supply over 2 million ounces a year of palladium, 2.5 million ounces. Do you realize, or the audience should realize, that 50% of Russia's greenhouse gases emanate from the smelters at Norilsk?
Wow.
Norilsk is coming under increasing pressure on an environmentally, on a decarbonization, on a global scale. And Mr. Potanin, who's the main owner, the oligarch that owns Norilsk, has made some very encouraging statements about how they're going to try and green up that. Well, that's going to add to costs big time at Norilsk. And again, I can't emphasize the importance of the location of this project, the geopolitical importance. It's not in Russia. It's not in South Africa. We're seeing right now COVID running riot again in South Africa. They're going into a third lockdown phase. That's going to impinge big time on palladium production from South Africa this year. Okay, that's not a long-term thing. We all hope we'll be out of that next year. But palladium supply demand is in good shape, and we're in good shape to fill some of the gaps over the next couple of decades. But, you know, we want to fast track this project now over the next 12, 18 months and see where we are.
Okay, thank you, Tony, for that. Let's play the comparison game here a little bit. When we're speaking about the majors in particular, how do you think the Skaergaard project compares, plus or minus, to other exploration projects out there that they might be looking at?
Well, I think there's a slide that Laurentian Bank produced. You can see where we are. The Platte Reef and the Watersburg project in South Africa are big, but they're still not developed yet. But you know, Platte Reef's making very, very good progress, as is Waterberg. Look where we are. I think we're the biggest outside by a country mile outside Russia and South Africa. Look, size isn't everything. You know, I mean, people will say, well, how quickly, you know, you're going to be mining at the scale of 2 million, 3 million ounces a year. Well, that'll take some time. But the beauty of this is we have a tremendous base here. We think we'll have several deposits within this layered intrusion. And we think we can fast track to development with some starter open pits. That's speculation at this stage. I hasten to say that that's not independently modeled yet. But we hope it will be by, you know, in the next, say, within the next 12 months. Okay,
thank you for that, Tony. And previously we've touched on the PEA. Can you tell me, although the PEA still needs to be completed, would this be, in your opinion, a mega capex project? And can you comment on what the footprint would look like?
Well, I think there'll be many alternatives for the development of this project. My own view right now, and really this is happening around the world with projects, that projects are starting to be mined on what I call incremental mining basis. So, and major precious metals, it's certainly capable of that, of financing that through to a starter open pit and then going underground. On the big scale, sure, that would require significant capex. But I mean, I think this with a starter pit, and with particularly now with this, if we can look at the hydrometallurgical process for producing metal on site, this has major implications for how we go about Skaergaard. So I'm not answering your question, Mark, because I can't answer it yet, and it's sort of speculative. This is why we're doing a PEA, to get the economic, and it's wrong of me to say it's going to be 200 million capex to start with, or it could rise to 750, or it could be $1 billion. You know, the PEA will look at the alternatives, but my gut feeling right now is that Major Precious can take this right through to stage gate starting of mining.
Understood. I appreciate the honesty there. Can you also please here, Tony, address required permits and other regulatory considerations that are unique to Greenland, so our audience has a better understanding?
Well, I don't think there's anything that's particularly unique to Greenland, but the good thing about Greenland is it has a modern mining act set in around 2009, 2010, which sets out very clearly the steps that have to be gone through to going from exploration to exploitation licenses, and the very important ESG aspects of that, the various environmental impact statements, the lovely initials, IBS, impact, social, etc. And working with SLR, we're very fortunate in a way that SLR, as our independent consultant, has an extensive ESG imprint within its firm, and we've already started to have our workshops. And we're embedding this right from day one into the exploration program. But anyone who wants a bit of bedtime reading and wants to download the 120-page 43-101 report, they'll see not only a very detailed view of the sampling that's been done and the history of exploration, they will also see also a very detailed explanation of the Mineral Act in Greenland, and the steps, the environmental steps that take you through from exploration through to exploitation. So it's good. It's a modern act. It's the steps are clearly laid out, and everyone worldwide has to do that. We're working towards what's called a TSM model, towards sustainable mining, with SLR, which is the Canadian government template, which is now even overtaking what's called the Equator Principles of the World Bank. This is being adopted, just been adopted in the DRC, been adopted by many governments worldwide, and we're working to that standard with SLR.
Great, thank you, Tony. Let's focus for a moment specifically on the summer program. Can you tell us what are the average widths of the mineralization?
Well, the mineralized package itself, including the what we could call the gang material, including the iron, titanium, vanadium mineralization, is around 45 meters thick. Okay. Within that, we have three discrete zones of precious metals. At the top, we have a fairly narrow, about a 1 meter zone, which is very gold rich. Our minimum mining width would be 2 meters. So we have a gold rich zone at the top. We have a mixed gold palladium zone in the middle, and then at the base we have a thicker, almost as much as 3 meter thick, 1 to 3 meter thick zone of very palladium rich mineralization. So these three zones interspersed with fairly comprehensive, fairly cohesive mineralization of iron, titanium, and vanadium, which appears to be pervasive throughout the whole deposit. So again, in looking, the PEA will look at a number of mining methods, open pit, this selective mining of the precious metal zones, but also can we bulk mine in places where we take the precious metal zones along with the gang material, which when processed would contain saleable products of these critical minerals. All this on a preliminary scale will be looked at in the PEA, and then that will set the template, Mark, for what we need to do in the summer of 2022 to really get this economic evaluation up to bankable feasibility speed.
Great. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. When we look ahead, there's obviously the short term, medium term, longer term. Let's take for a moment, say the next 12 to 18 months. What are some of the key moments in the timeline, the key turning points that we should be watching for with you as we watch the company?
Okay, well, firstly is the start of the program. Journey of 1,000 miles, as Mao Zedong said, starts with the first step. Right. So we start that program, I would say we're in Greenland, everyone's going through COVID regs, right? The COVID protocols right now. Hope to start that in a couple of weeks' time.
Okay.
That will go through to the end of October. We'll, again, because of the nature, we'll obviously fly out samples. We'll be using the airstrip to fly samples out. They go to Iceland, then they go to Ireland, to the ALS lab. We would hope in late August, early September to start to be able to, produce results that will hopefully reinforce the historical sampling, etc. And that'll proceed then from late August onwards on a regular basis through the rest of the year. And we would hope to translate those results into a mineral resource estimate during the fourth quarter, let's say by the end of the fourth quarter of this year, and then using that data to go forward with the PEA by the end of Q1 next year. A lot of things going on in parallel. At the time, we'll be then starting to investigate this agency financing through Exim Bank, through the European agencies, for further non-dilutive financing for our feasibility work next summer, et cetera, et cetera. Innumerable things going on along in parallel, but those are the key things that we hope to start with the drill results coming out late summer, into the MRE, mineral resource estimate, in Q4, PEA Q1 next year.
Thank you for that. Now, how about if we lift the elevation a little bit further to a 30,000-foot view here, Tony, and say over the next 5 years, what is the 5-year plan? Would you say to take it to production or to divest?
Well, it depends on the scale. This company is certainly capable, with the skill sets that we have and with people that we're adding and the consultants and the mining teams, the metallurgical teams that we're working with. We're certainly capable of stage gating this, of starting, the open pit, if open pit is shown to have resource potential, or small scale and underground mining. But look, let's be realistic. I think if we have the success that we think we have, and with the excitement that we think we're going to generate, with the market prices being where they are, I think we'll get we've already sort of had preliminary discussions on a potential strategic investment. We're still talking to a number of groups. It just shows we raised $8.5 million. We closed, $8.5 million out of our 10 within a week or so of announcing the financing, which was very encouraging. Good support for existing shareholders. I think we want to add value, Mark. Okay, the key is, as you come along the development cycle, for all the stakeholders, particularly people who join us at this 35-cent level where we are right now, we want to add value for them, and we look at all the strategic ways that we can do that. And it's not avoiding your question; it's a great question. I think if we add value, it'll be obvious, and it'll be obvious that of the menu of financing options that we then have available to us.
I appreciate that. A very honest and acceptable answer to that question, Tony. Thank you for that. There's a lot of talk about soccer these days in England, as we talked about before our session started today. And anytime you look at a great team, you look at the star players. So, the audience understands the value of it's speculative, there's potential. And as investors, we're always taking that chance and hoping for the best. But you bring quite a depth of history in the industry to the table as a star player with major precious metals. And so the history with Dragon Group, for example, can you tell me all those years that you've brought forward to the table? How does all of that experience help you on a day-to-day basis today with where the company is?
Yeah, well, I'll mention that in a moment. But to say, when you say it's speculative, it is speculative. All projects are speculative. Anything can go wrong in the mining business. Don't forget here, we're coming off the base of a massive amount of historical exploration. This is not a greenfield site by any, we're not wildcat drilling here. We're development drilling, okay? We're coming off the basis of, and that's what attracted me to the project. And really, that's what I've done with Dragon Group, and and when we were with Frank Justra, when we were looking at when we developed Yorkton Securities, we looked at projects with existing resources that we, with our investment expertise, could add value by taking them along this mythical mine development cycle, of which there are many, many stages. And I could bore you for forever with talking about the stages along the mine development cycle.
Right.
But I have had experience of doing it, and I think what it allows me to do is to know what I don't know. I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. I know when you have to bring in experts. I know when you have to have independent consultants involved. but also I know that an owner's team is needed to work with these independent consultants to drive them, to focus them on what's needed for each step of the cycle. So,
Yeah.
it's only taken me 40 years to know this.
Fair enough. I appreciate that. It brings a lot of history to the table. And once again, Tony, it's always a pleasure working with you. You're very candid, and it's been a really deep dive tour through the company and where things are right now with the project. So we appreciate that. I want to thank you for your time. Is there anything else that comes to mind to share with our audience before we wrap up today?
Well, we all have to promote our projects. Okay, it's a very competitive world out there. But I would just say this right now. I think we, at where we are today, both with this financing and in the market, I mean, people don't have to participate in the financing. It's a pretty liquid stock. You can buy the stock at 35, 36 cents, right now. I think we represent unique value here. I really do. Given the historical exploration, the fact we have our arms around this resource right now, it's not speculative in the sense that many exploration projects are speculative. Of course, there are steps that we're going to have to go through, and there's no guarantees in the mining business. I'm not about to sort of give any guarantees, by the way. But, we have a major resource here of global significance. We have the skill sets and the financing now to take it through to the next stage. So I think that to anyone in the audience right now, I would say, join us. Come and join us. Become a shareholder. We love to have you on our register. That's what this game's all about. We have tremendous support from our existing shareholder base. So come on. We offer great value here at these levels, and with the precious metal prices being where they are, as I say, palladium prices look strong. And by the way, we have a lot of gold too.
I love it, Tony. A beautiful invitation. Once again, it's always a joy to talk to you. And I know our audience appreciates the fact that we can ask directly from the source some of the key questions we're curious about as investors. So thank you for your time. And I guarantee you we'll be watching closely. We look forward to another time to sit down and talk more with you. Thanks for your time, Tony.
Thank you very much, Mark. And thanks to everyone for listening.
All the best. Tony Williams, CEO, Chairman at Major Precious Metals. We thank everyone for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to interact with those around the world, and we look forward to our next journey together. Tony, I'll send you all the best from Canada, and take care for now.
Thank you very much. Cheers.